I'm going to start talking. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Thanks to everyone on YouTube for your patience. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we were able to overcome them, and I think we're going to have an awesome presentation today. And may I just say, it's so great to see so many people joining us live via YouTube. In these challenging times, it's so great to still be able to be doing these events, but broadcasting them live into the homes of parents, educators, and students across North America. So we have a really great event for today. We're going to hang out with Wynne today. Judd has bushwhacked through the jungles of Belize and China. He's rappelled into the deepest volcanic pit in the Big Island in Hawaii. He's traveled to the most remote inhabited place on Earth, Easter Island, and he does all of this to learn about caves and the secrets that they can contain. He even helps develop some technology for NASA for possible exploration of caves on other planets in the future. Pretty wild. Judd, it's so great to have you joining us live today. We've got classes joining us from across North America on YouTube and live on camera with us. We're excited to get to know you a little bit better. And of course, we'll have some questions for you.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all during these most unprecedented times. Hope everyone is doing the best we can under these circumstances. Hopefully, I will provide you with a brief diversion. What we're going to be talking about today is some of the work that I've done, and I'm taking this opportunity to take us to different parts of the world, albeit in a very abbreviated amount of time. And let's see here. All right, so this was I took the name of this talk after this quote by Jack Kerouac, who was a beat poet during the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Nothing behind me, everything ahead of me, whatsoever. So on the road. And this is something that I've often felt like. I feel like, a itinerant scientist bouncing from place to place and traveling the world, being able to meet some very interesting people and learning about cultures, learning about music, learning about food, and all in the name of science. I get to do this because my job takes me to these different parts of the world. Our first stop today is going to be northern Guangxi province in southern China. And here's a map of China, and you can see here, Guangxi is the area that is outlined in red. And the area that I'm going to be reporting on today is where that red star is located. So that's where we were doing some work back in 2016. This is some folks that we met in a village. My friend that you see wearing the helmet, that is Dr. Jital Wang, and we were studying caves, and he, with his assistance, he was pretty much my guide. He made all this happen. And this is something that I have taken very much to heart, is this quote here, that I am in part all that I have seen and met in life. And I'm sure that you all will be able to relate to this as you all get older and accumulate more experiences, that we ultimately become the composition of things that we've seen and done in our lives.
I would hide it. And then
someone's phone is not on mute. Could we please mute that?
Yeah, we have a group who just joined us. Ermelia, there we go.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is the area that we're working. You can see here, this looks like a very this is a very foreign, unique, weird-looking landscape. We have these big towers of Mount karst or limestone that are called Fen Glen, and that's where all the caves are. And what you can see here is this lowland area. This is where folks live. This is where people have been farming for thousands of years. And up in the mountains is far more pristine, and in some cases, it's been largely untouched. Sharing with you all a few photos from the area where I was working. And this is something that is really neat, and something that I really like to drive home during this part of the talk is the importance of durian. Now, durian is a very important crop in Southeast Asia, but it is incredibly stinky. It has been described as smelling, people have described it as smelling ranging from fermenting onions to gym socks that have been in your gym bag for far too long in a very wet environment. It is very stinky fruit. It's an acquired taste, but people really like it. It's very important economically to Southeast Asia, and it's because of bats. This is Eonectris spelaea. This is a cave roosting bat, and this bat is responsible for pollinating the durian fruit. And one can go so far as to say is if there were no bats, there would largely be no durian. So bats are very important pollinators, and in this part of the world, they are incredibly important to pollinating the durian fruit. And this is a little composition of me trying durian for the very first time. Started off pretty good. Did not like it at all. But I will have to say, I went back to China a couple of years later, and I had tried it when it was cooked in a pastry, and it was actually much better. But let's get to the work here. So this is the sort of work that I've done thus far from my work in southern China. We've identified as many as 10 new species. All of these are new to science. And as you can see here, these are really amazing animals. Many of these are adapted to the cave environment. They lack eyes. They have long legs, long antennae. They lack pigmentation. All of these are characteristics for being tightly linked to that subterranean environment, enabling them to persist and thrive underground. This is perhaps my favorite photo that I took during this study. This is called a dragon millipede, and for good reason. You can see here there are these spines along each carapace segment of the animal's back. It's just such a fascinating animal, and if you were really quiet in this cave, you could actually hear these millipedes walking. You could hear their feet touching the ground because there were so many of them in this cave. This is a sporacid spider or a huntsman spider, and if you look closely, you can see here that it has a cricket in its mouth. This is one of the bats that we saw. Unfortunately, we did not see many bats during this work, but we saw bats in 2 caves, and this was one of the ones that we documented. So now let's go to Rapa Nui, which is also known as Easter Island. This is a image courtesy of NASA from, it's basically a satellite image of Easter Island. And I've been very fortunate in that I have been to Easter Island. Oh my goodness, I've been there 5 times now. In my last trip, I lived there for 4 months. So I've spent quite a bit of time on Easter Island, and I've really had the opportunity to learn a lot about the people, the culture, and of course, the island and the ecology that the island has to offer. This is a great take-home message and something to really be thinking about in this trying time is that how everything is connected, right? And we're really seeing that today with the pandemic, and it's so true in nature is that if we look at a single thing, we see that it's attached to everything else. We're all connected. Everything in nature is interconnected. Rapa Nui, the people of Rapa Nui, who are also known as Rapa Nui, they have a very proud culture. It's a Polynesian culture. This is during one of their festivals called Tapiti, and you can see that they're dressed traditionally. And there was one time, my very first trip there, I decided to become part of the act, and I said, okay, well, yeah, I'll get my face painted. So I had my face painted with traditional pigments from the island. And you can see here, this is the type of work that I've been able to do. I've been able to travel the world and access some of the most difficult places, all to look for interesting, well, in this particular case, this was looking for endemic insects, animals that occur on this island and no place else on Earth. This is us doing some work here. And this is why the work on Easter Island is so important. So you can see here, I want to to look at the stark contrast between these two pictures. If you look at the image here, you can see at left, you can see what the island looks like today. Well, before the Pacific Islanders arrived there, it looked much different. It was a palm-dominated scrub woodland. Polynesians arrived about 500 to 800 years ago, and during that time, it wasn't just the people that arrived. It was a combination of environmental and human factors. It resulted in the island shifting from a forested area, a largely forested area, to a grassland. And I refer to this as the final nail in the ecological coffin for Rapa Nui. What happened after that was the Europeans arrived and they converted the entire island into a sheep herding operation. So what this resulted in was there are very few places where you can find native ecosystems and ecosystems supporting native animals. And this work led me to work in the entrances of caves. And I thought immediately that this was a place that there could be animals, in this particular case, insects that are restricted to the entrances and occur no place else on Earth. And that's what we did. We sampled these areas, and lo and behold, we found 8 insect species that were new to science. And given that catastrophic ecological shift that happened on the surface, these animals became isolated in these pockets of native vegetation, and they're stuck there. And we didn't find them on the surface, and we only found them in cave entrances. And this is something to think about. So what we did was we wanted to figure out, with 2 of those species, we found out that they, not only did they occur on Easter Island, but they were also endemic to 2 other islands in Polynesia. So the question became, how did they get there? Well, the first thought was maybe birds, oceanic birds that can fly vast distances. Maybe they carried them, because insects will sometimes glom on or hold on to a bird and be able to be dispersed a very far distance. Well, that was unlikely given the fact that it was let me see if I can, I'll go ahead and bring this up. It was what is called a springtail and an isopod. There were no known cases of that for either of those animals. We then thought, well, maybe wind could have carried these animals that far. Well, we looked at the literature, we did our homework, and we found out, well, for springtails and isopods, we'll go back here real quick. This is the isopod, the roly-poly, and this is the springtail. And for both of those animals, there were no known occurrences of them being transported or moved vast distances by the wind. So we thought, okay, well, what is the other option? Well, the other option is that it perhaps, and this is the most likely explanation, is that the oceanic transported them. So what happened was there was a storm event, a tree or vegetation fell into the water, all the raft holding on to it.
Hey,
Please,
Thomas's
come
iPad,
on.
can you please mute your mic?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
And then once that happened, they were transported a vast distance. So here's what we have here. We have these 3 different islands. We have Rapa Nui down here in the bottom right. We have Rapa Iti, or the Austral Islands, in the bottom left. And in Hawaii, up here in the top portion of the screen. And then what we have is for our springtail, this guy here, we found it initially in Hawaii. Later we found it on Rapa Nui. And then what we have is about 4,000 miles of open ocean. And you can see here that it's going to be really tricky for the animal to make it across because of these counter currents that are traveling in either direction. Our next animal, about 2,000 miles between Rapa Iti and Rapa Nui, is this terrestrial isopod. Well, you can see how the South Pacific gyre kind of swirls in that direction. So it's possible, but maybe not likely, because Rapa Nui is this tiny speck of rock in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean. So what we thought and proposed is we proposed that this is the best explanation, because the ancient Polynesians would transport plants in gourds, and they would move them from island to island to island that way. And once they would arrive at the next island, they would plant that plant, and that plant would grow and provide them with maybe medicinal food, maybe medicine, maybe materials for making sails and nets. And they would continue to do this as they moved across Polynesia. So we proposed the canoe bug hypothesis. And I'd like to take just a second here to recognize my friend and colleague here, Art Whistler. We lost him beginning of the month to COVID-19. He was the inspiration behind this canoe bug hypothesis, and he actually wrote this book here. You can see it's by Art Whistler. So anyhow, it was through reading his book and my conversations with him that inspired me to put forward this idea that the insects were probably transported across Polynesia by the ancient Polynesians. And this is the canoe bug. So this is the name of this animal you can see here, Stylonoceus manuvaca. And manuvaca is Rapa Nui for canoe animal or canoe bug. All right, so let's move on to our final stop here. This is Runaway Creek Nature Reserve in central Belize. And this was the very last place that we will be talking about today. And this was the most recent expedition that I conducted. I did this this past July. And you can see here that this is Belize, and this little locator map you can see here in the bottom portion of this map. The red area is where Belize is. Belize is in Central America, and it is surrounded by the Yucatan Peninsula, which is Mexico, and then you have Guatemala. And you can see here in this other red area, this is the area that I was working within Runaway Creek. This is a great thing to be thinking about here in terms of, figuring out what we want to do with our lives. And that is to follow your bliss and to pursue things that make you happy and things that you'd like to do, because that will make you the most productive person in society, and it will make you, it'll make you happy. And that's what we want in life. We want to be happy. This happened at the very beginning of our expedition. So this is the very first cave we went to, and we climb up this hill, and we hear some rustling in the tree above, and we look up, and there were howler monkeys. And under other circumstances, it might not be so interesting because howler monkeys occur throughout that part of the world, but this was neat because this was the first time that we had seen howler monkeys in 10 years at Runaway Creek. There was a big storm that moved through, a hurricane, and it went right over the top of Runaway Creek, and it brought high winds of 90 miles per hour, torrential rains, and at that point, that was the last time that anyone saw howler monkeys. So when we documented for the first time in 10 years the presence of a couple of howler monkeys. This is an amblyopygid, or whip scorpion. This is one of the caves that we were working in. This is a harvestman, and this was really neat because this was the first time from this family this is the first time this family has been identified in Belize. This is called a diplurin or bristletail, and this animal was so cool. So you can see here, if you look at it, you can see that it has what is called cerci, these really long tail characters. And these are about 3.5 times the length of the body. And the animal, when it would walk like this. And it was using those tail characters to sweep, to look, and presumably for food, for a place to hide, maybe for mates. But that's what it was doing. It was moving like this, and it was so neat to watch. I spent like 20 minutes watching this animal, to tell you the truth. This is a kalimba. This is a springtail. I showed you the springtails from Easter Island. Well, here's a springtail from Belize. And you can see that this animal is uniquely adapted to the cave environment. You see that its antenna here is almost 1.5 times the length of its body, which is a telltale sign of cave adaptation. All right, here's a video I wanted to share with you all. I got a couple of these. Oh, shoot. Are you getting video? Are you getting audio?
Yeah, it's coming through, Jeff.
Video? Okay, good.
I just got there.
Darn, Jed, it was coming through, but then it stopped on us.
All right. Yeah, that's unfortunate. All right. Well, I will mime us through this, or I will talk us through this one.
Perfect.
Okay. So what we're doing here is we're counting bats as they're emerging, and this was part of the project. You can see the bats here within the cave entrance. And what we would do is we're sitting here watching the bats emerge, and there were 3 of us that were counting the bats, and it was really important because one, we're in a, it's thick jungle around us, so we needed, all of our eyes to be watching the bats because sometimes they would pop out partially out of the cave and then they'd pop back in. And you can see Stefan here waving, and I'm asking him, did the bat go? Did the bat leave the cave? And he's like, no, it went back in. So that's what we were doing, and I had my notepad, and I was taking down notes, and I was marking the ones that were exiting, and we're using that to tally the total number of bats that we were seeing exiting each cave. And it's unfortunate that once again the audio is not working, and because you can hear all the animals in the background, and it's a pristine rainforest. It's quite a spectacular part of the world. All right, let's see. Okay, here we go. So with the bat sampling, what we did is we obviously were counting them as they were exiting the roosts at night. And the reason why we had to do that here is because if you look at this bat here, you look really closely and you see this bulge underneath the bat's chin. Well, that's a pup, and that's a baby bat. And so what we were doing was we had to, when we realized that all the caves that we were going to, all of them were supporting maternity roosts or roosts that had bats, mother bats with pups, we thought that it would not be a good idea to capture and handle the bats because we didn't want to injure the pups. There's another example here. There's some more. These are called phylostomids or whispering bats, and you can see where's the pup. Oh yeah, the pup's right up here under the wing. And this is a small harem. This is the male. You can see the male sticking out his chest at me, telling me to leave his women alone. And you can see the two female bats here, and you can see the pups underneath their chins. Here's another example. You can see here's the mother bat, and once again you can see the little baby pup right here. All right, so we did a lot of work here in Belize. We were wanting to monitor the animals that were using the caves as well, the big animals. And this was because we knew that crocodiles and jaguars were using these caves. We found evidence of jaguars in all of the caves that we went to, and we found evidence of crocodiles in 3 of the 5 caves that we went to. And this is a video. There's not a whole lot of sound going on here, but this is a cave that was located right above, within a kilometer of 2 of the caves that we were sampling. It was a tunnel cave, and my colleagues had put a video motion sense camera in there, and this was the first time that they had documented a mother jaguar with a cub moving through Runaway Creek Nature Reserve. So that was a really neat discovery for the folks that work there. Let's see if they'll want me. There we go. Here's another jaguar in a cave, and what's really important when we want to figure out the actual jaguar, the individual jaguar, so we can be able to differentiate between the different individuals within a population of jaguars, is you want to be able to photograph both sides of the animal, because it has these roseate pattern here, and this roseate pattern is very distinctive, but you often need both sides of the animal to be able to make a confirmation that it is different than another individual. Here's a puma. We call them mountain lions here. They refer to them as puma down there. And in terms of the puma and the jaguar, we believe that they're entering caves to feed on the paca. And this is the animal that they're feeding on. We found tracks of paca throughout every cave that we went into. So this is something that I often think about within the context of what I do. This is a Shakespearean quote, and what it's talking about is how our ability to interpret the world is based on our experiences and what we presently know. And I feel that with my work that I'm constantly learning more and constantly expanding my understanding of the world and my understanding of ecology and my understanding of how these systems underground work, which is constantly reshaping my philosophy. And with that, there are, thank you very much. It's in Mandarin, it's Sheshe, Maruru Roa, which is thank you in Rapa Nui, and Bantioks, which is thank you in Kechik Maya.
All right. Awesome, Jut. Thanks so much for sharing that awesome presentation with us. And yeah, thanks so much for helping us get through the technical difficulties. I think it worked out in the end. All right. Why don't you try and hit the stop screen share, Jut, and see if it'll bring it back to us.
All right, let's see here. All right.
Okay.
Back.
Let's see here. I might have to spotlight your video. Let me track it down. Where is Jut? Ah, there you are. I'm just going to spotlight your video because it still thinks you're Jesse talking. So it's trying to look at him. But hopefully that will help there. And Jesse, if you are still in there, can you just spotlight your video so that it locks on Jut for everybody? All right. Well, thanks to everybody who tuned in via YouTube today. We've got lots of students tuning in, so send us in some questions. We'll get those in for Jut. And then obviously a huge thank you to all our groups joining us on camera today. I'm going to give them a shout out today. So we've got, there we go. We've got Mrs. Morse's class joining us in Guelph, Ontario, 4th graders. We're going to take some questions from them. We've got Mrs. Matthews' class joining us from Vienna, Virginia. Looks like a 5th grade class. And then Mrs. Gottlieb's class is joining us probably via YouTube from Flushing, New York. So we'll pick on her in a couple minutes for see if any questions came in from her groups. So Jud, it looks like some amazing experiences around the world. And, you know, everyone talks about the ocean as a place where we're going to find a lot of new species, but it seems like caves have a lot in store for us to find as well.
Oh, yeah. I've often said that the two frontiers of scientific discovery are deep subaqueous and deep subterranean. So going deep into the ocean or going deep underground. Yes, yes, indeed. We have much to learn about both environments.
All right. So to the students who are joining us live on camera, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's participants with a number 39 next to it. If you click on it, it opens a little thing at the side, and there should be an option to raise your hand. A little blue hand will come up when you raise your hand, and that's how I will know to pick you for a question. So when you have a question, raise your hand. Look, oh, we got one already. Nadia, do you want to unmute for me and let's get a question? Oh, maybe they were just practicing. Let's try Andrew. Andrew Rushforth has a question. Go ahead and unmute, Andrew.
Thank you. That was good. And I was wondering, how does the jaguar see the paca in the cave?
Well, as we know, cats have much better eyesight than we do, right? So they're able to see them, and also they're going to be able to hear them and smell them. And in terms of where they're found in the cave, well, okay, so there's this beautiful story about jaguars and how they're important to the Maya people in that part in Central America. And what they say that when the sun sets, the sun becomes a jaguar and it enters the cave. And when the sun rises, and then the jaguar exits the other side of the earth and becomes the sun again to complete the cycle. And so we've known about jaguars using caves for millennia, thousands of years they've been using caves. So we know that they can go deep into the caves, but where we found the evidence of jaguar in these caves that we went to They were largely in the entrance and, you know, a little wet further into the cave into the twilight zone, but we were finding them primarily in the entrance area. And that's where the paca are hanging out as well. So there is some light, but you know, during the daytime, yeah, they can see them just fine. We could see the paca just fine. But yeah, they do have much better senses than we do in terms of their ability to smell and hear.
All right.
Thank you.
Boys and girls, just a reminder that the way I had to join today, I can't control your microphone. So please try to keep them on mute for us. And we're going to get Nick. Nick, if you want to unmute, we'll go ahead and grab your question now.
Did you ever get one of those videos that you did for the jaguar of a crocodile?
No. Why would you ask that question?
Because you said
that was something that got us the entire project, because we had all these cameras set up in all these caves, and we're hoping that we were going to see, you know, as we're going through the footage, we're like, okay, the next one's going to be a crocodile. Oh, okay, what about the next one? No, we didn't see them. So the crocodiles eluded us on this particular trip. And what we think happened was that we needed to have the traps, the cameras deployed for a much longer period of time. For the time in which we were there, I was there for 10 days, and the camera traps were rolling, collecting footage for 8 of those 10 days. So it's too short of a time frame, and that's one of our goals, is to go back and to leave those doggone cameras in the caves for like a year. And I'll be very surprised at that point if we don't have a picture of a crocodile. But great question, and yeah, that was something that I kind of left that project like this. I was like, oh man, you know, I was kind of beaten up about the fact that we did not catch the crocodile on camera.
All right. It just means you got to go back.
Exactly. And it's part of science too. I mean, we got to think about that. When we do these projects, we have a lot of expectations in terms of what we think we're going to accomplish and the things we're going to learn. And then you get out into the field and you do the field work, and sometimes the field work provides you with information that leads you in a completely different direction. Sometimes you don't collect the data that you hope to collect. It's all part of the process.
Yeah. So Jed, I've got a few groups on YouTube have a similar question. Can you tell us about another cool insect you found in the caves?
Oh, shoot. There's so many. There really are. You saw the whip scorpions. Let me see. Do this real quick. I can actually share the screen. This one was a really neat one. Take me just a second to find it. This. Let me see. Can I share the screen?
Did it take away the option again?
Right.
Oh.
You guys got it?
Yep.
Okay, this is a short-tailed whip scorpion. And we found this in Belize. Now, these animals are typically eyeless. The entire family is eyeless. And most of these, the animals have this pale color to them. So this is not a subterranean adapted animal per se. But still, it was a really neat find for us, because you can see how small it is. So it's about 5 millimeters in length. So it's half a centimeter. Very tiny animal.
All right. Very cool. Porter, I see your hand is up. Go ahead and unmute for me, Porter.
I didn't know my hand was up.
Oh, that's okay. Ronan, go ahead, Ronan. Ronan, you there, bud?
Okay, just say thank you.
There we go. We got you now.
I forgot my question.
That's okay. If it comes back, raise your hand again, Ronan.
Happens to me all the time.
All right. Ms. Gottlieb, would you like to pop on? Do you have a question from your group?
Yes, we have 2 questions. One student wanted to know, when you were in the caves in Belize counting the bats, what time period was that and how long?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so typically what we do is, we were there, it was a 10-day trip, and we had 4 caves that we went to that had bats. So we wanted to go at least one night for each cave, and that's all we were able to muster for this particular trip. But what you do is you get there well before sunset, and that's because you're providing food for all the mosquitoes, because they're going to feed on you for the entire time you're there. But you go there way before sunset. So we got there about 6:37, and then we waited until the sun set. And as the sun begins to set, bats are very different in their emergence habits. Some of them emerge earlier than others. Some of them emerge later than others. So in order to capture all of the animals emerging, all the bats emerging, you remain there until well after sunset. And typically what we do is the approach that we were using, we're 45 minutes to an hour after the last bat emerged. And that was in ideal circumstances. What we think happened is that the best way to do this is to use an IR camera, because the bats aren't seeing that light. But you saw how bright that light was that I was shining on that cave entrance. I believe that we affected the natural behavior of the animals by us being there, and they started to come out, and all of a sudden, look, they're blasted with this bright light, and they turn around and went back into the cave. So we basically called it, we did each count for about 2 hours.
Thank you. Another student, we're really studying a lot about fossils and rock formation. So a student wanted to know if you've ever found any fossils.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We found in one cave in New Mexico, we found a ice-aged ringtail cat. In the back of the cave, it was a complete skeleton. I mean, it was like the animal laid down and died and became a skeleton. I mean, it was perfectly articulated.
Wow.
And let's see, we found evidence of goat, an extinct goat species from Grand Canyon. What else? Oh my goodness, there's just so much. The work that we did in Spain 2 years ago, the floor of 2 of the caves were completely covered in bat bones. I mean, it was like a carpet of bat bones, and that was likely thousands and thousands of years of activity of bats. So yeah, caves are neat, and oftentimes what you have to do is you have to work with people of different kinds of scientists. So I've worked with paleontologists who study fossils. I've worked with archaeologists who study ancient civilizations. I've worked with hydrologists that study water, geologists. Pretty much every ology at some point I've worked with those folks because there are a lot of questions that emerge when you get into a cave.
Great, thank you so much.
All right,
My
great
pleasure.
questions. Rose, go ahead and turn your microphone on.
Okay. How long do the bugs live for?
How long do bugs live for? Oh gosh. These particular bugs that we find in caves, especially the cave adapted ones, golly, that's a really tough question. It's hard to, I don't want to give an answer in terms of precise amount of time, because it's going to
My
vary.
microphone's on.
When it comes to the insects that are adapted to living in caves, what we do know about them is that they typically live a lot longer than their sister surface relatives. So closely related surface relatives, they can outlive them, perhaps 2 to 3 times as long. That's because the cave environment is often a nutrient limiting environment. And what happens is those animals that ultimately colonize and become adapted to that particular environment, there are a lot of changes that will happen. And when those changes happen, those changes involve them being able to live longer and being able to live longer without food. And oftentimes what happens is they go from having a lot of offspring to having very few offspring. And when they do have those offspring, they have them much later in life than their sister surface relatives. So those are some of the things that happen when an animal becomes adapted to the cave environment. They're much longer lived.
All right. Great question, Rose.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry?
A wonderful question, and
Okay.
I should be more prepared next time to be able to at least provide an example. But you know, that sort of information is fairly sparse in the literature in terms of exactly how long these animals that are adapted to the caves live, because we don't do those sort of experiments.
Yeah.
And when we do, like I said, they're very few.
Well, it goes to show that there's still a lot left for us to discover in caves. So any students thinking about a biology career, you might want to look into caves. You can find some pretty cool things in there. I think we can squeeze one more question in. So I'm going to do a quick scan through. If you weren't able to raise your hand virtually, raise your hand on the camera and I'll see if there's anybody we need to grab who wasn't able to virtually raise their hand. Does anyone have one more question for Jut? Otherwise, I can grab one off YouTube. All right, let me grab one. Oh, no, I think I see one now. Galifi, do you want to turn your microphone on? There you go.
Hi. Were any of the bugs that you found in the caves rare? Like, have they been found anywhere else?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Okay, so yes, so this is how it works. The example that I provided with Easter Island, those animals are what we call endemic species, and when we use the term endemic, that means that they, well, to be flippant, they occur in that place until we find them somewhere else. That's typically how it works. But the more constrained definition of endemic means that they're native to a particular area and occur no place else on the planet. So it was a interesting situation on Easter Island where we had these animals that were restricted to cave entrances, and based on the current data, that suggested that they didn't occur anywhere else. They didn't occur on the surface based on a preliminary examination of the surface, our review of the literature, that they only occurred in the entrances. So those animals were endemic to that part of the cave and to Easter Island, with the exception of those two species that I mentioned that occurred on the other neighboring Polynesian islands. With other species that are adapted to the subterranean environment, those are going to be animals that are tightly linked to the subterranean ecosystem, and often where you find them will be maybe only in one cave or only in a particular geological formation and no place else on Earth.
All right. Well, a huge shout out to our group on YouTube. Thanks for sticking around. Well, we started a little bit late today. A huge shout out to all the students who joined us on camera today. Thanks for your great questions. And Jut, thanks so much for working with us and overcoming the tech today. That was I've never seen a microphone take over the host before, but good thing we were able to make it work.
Yeah, that was interesting. That well, keeps us on our toes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So last thing we'll do today, Jut, is I'm going to turn all the mics on and give the students a chance to say a big goodbye and thank you. But I'll let you say goodbye to them first.
All right. Well, hey, y'all, thank you so much. Take care of your brother. Take care of your families. And we'll all get through this
It's
together.
on right now.
Thank you so much for
It's on right now.
joining us today.
All right, boys and girls, turn your mics on for me. A big goodbye and thank you for Jut. Go ahead.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Bye.